Chapter 7, The Banality of Evil. It was then that my piece chose to accidentally discharge. The shot went straight into the cassette player over the bar. Fragments of plastic shrapnel shot out all over the place, and the tape spooled itself out all over the floor like the deck was spewing out lungfuls of blood or entrails or something else. Obviously, the tune came to an abrupt end at this point. An astonished-looking guy with dreadlocks looked up at me like he was astonished. "What the fuck?" he went. I improvised and I went into my customary damage limitation routine. 1. That cassette constitutes an unlawful reproduction of a copyright work. 2. That you are committing a criminal offence by publicly disseminating a copyright work without permission and without payment of royalties and associated fees. 3. This venue is not licensed by the relevant authority for public performances. 4. Or dancing, if that's what it actually was. Or 5. Music, for that matter, either. 6. Say your prayers, motherfucker! I punched the cunt in the gut and he doubled up, so I kicked him in the teeth while he was still down there. He keeled over backwards. Ah! I grabbed his greasy dreads and I spun him around on the beery ground. He was kneeling in front of me like an exotic fruit. Like this. Right. It was nearly in front of me on the exotic ground like an exotic fruit I intended to do a six-pack on. The onlookers in the bar moved even further back, clutching at a counterpiece. A terrified old geezer in a postman's uniform suddenly puked into his mailbag with the fear or the beer or both. I let off a round in his general direction. The sack burst in an explosion of confetti and vomit, spattering the guys on either side of him. They recoiled in disgust, like the gun in my fist had. It was only then that I realised that I didn't know exactly what order you were meant to do the six-pack business in. Should I work at one side, foot, kneecap, elbow? Start doing pairs on either side, but from the top or downwards? Were elbows even involved? I didn't know, it was fucking complex. I should have thought it through beforehand. Anyway, it was too late now, so I just shot him in the right foot first. His expensive trainer was instantly depreciated, as opposed to being instantly deprecated, which it was at the same time. It was a fucking shithouse apology for a shoe. Anyway, at first he screamed, and then he started on the customary gibbering and howling. When I shot him in the other foot, great gobbets of blood and bone fragments splodged up onto the stripper who was over by the bar, and I watched transfixed as her fingers moved downwards to remove a bloody chunk from her nether regions. The chunk was discarded, and she tried to wipe off the blood and gunk off herself. She only ended up spreading it around and inadvertently arousing herself in the process. A finger slipped into the depths of her feminine mystery. I didn't see that coming. Obviously, she was one of those women who are sexually aroused by extreme gratuitous violence. This could be a marriage made in heaven. They didn't grow on trees, you know. Suddenly, I was distracted as a crazy fuckwit leapt over the bar, brandishing a cricket bat like some kind of berserker. I let off another round subconsciously, and the cricket bat exploded in a bunch of willowy splinters, erupting in all directions, and a couple of especially evil ones landed in my assailant's eyeballs. Aye! He went like a racist caricature in a 1970s war comic. I also noticed that some of the splinters were sticking in his arse. I was amazed at the contortions he must have performed to make this particular thing possible, and how it might have gone unmentioned in the narrative up until this point. Just then, the stripper grunted. She was still digitally remasturbating as she lay back on the bar. With her spur hand, she manipulated the pert antenna of her starboard hemisphere. Eyes closed, lips pouted, standard operational procedure as her climax impended. The guy I was six-packing had fainted meanwhile. I realised that I was still holding him up by his ridiculous hairstyle. The place had pretty much emptied by now, obviously, except for him and the guy who was clutching his eyes and trying, like a little girl, to cry miserably. But he was failing because of his terrible agony, and it struck me as ironic that it was his colleague that I'd previously regaled with the Oedipal pejorative. I felt a tug at my sleeve and I spun around. It was the stripper again. "We've got to get out of this place," she went, quoting Cynthia Weil appositely. Good idea, I heard myself go. She pulled me to the door, and posed at the coat rack to pull on a see-through PVC raincoat and pick up her tankard of takings. I held the door open for her chivalrously, and the daylight burst in on her and her amazing arse. There was a lime green Vespa directly outside the pub. She hitched up her mac and threw her leg over. "Get on!" she barked, pulling some wiry shit from under the handlebars and fiddling with it. I got on behind her, making sure I straddled her scooter manfully, because it all looked a bit effeminate to me. I heard a bellow from the pub, the doors flew open again. Although I should have been focusing on matters closer at hand, I noticed that the pub was called the Cock in Hand. Meanwhile, the bloke with the ice thing blumbered outwards. He screamed, the bright sunlight assailing his shredded seeing bulbs, and off we sped. Quite slowly, on account of this thing being powered by a motor less powerful than a lot of spin dryers have. But it was still quick enough to outrun a blinded cunt anyway. Anyway, as the poor geezer lunged at us, he fell under a street-sweeping van that had been bearing down, washing the curbstones. Fucking thing was loud enough, and I'd always thought that blind people were meant to have better hearing to make up for it. That obviously wasn't the case here. The last we saw in the rear-view mirrors, he was vanishing, being sucked feet first into the spinning brushes. Well, it just wasn't his day. Okay. And that's the end of that chapter. Look, that's the end of that chapter. It says so. Right. Just give me a minute, because that was a bit tiring. I'll be right with you. You can also just gather your thoughts and reflect on what you've just heard. Whether you wanted to hear it, and whether you want to hear anything like that ever again in the future.